Nielsen ratings, ESPN likes to do some funny math. You can't find those numbers anywhere else. Every AI lists ESPN as the source, not Nielsen. Last time I checked, ESPN isn't in the ratings business. They're reporting their own ratings. Why did it take so long to put this out? I'm suspicious. Amazing for a game that couldn't even sell out.
The numbers just dropped, and the WNBA is in serious trouble. Game 1 of the finals was supposed to be this huge, history-making event, but fans are now saying the league straight-up faked the hype. ESPN bragged that the opener pulled in the biggest audience in nearly 3 decades, calling it a monumental moment for women's basketball. But the second people actually looked at the data, things started smelling real suspicious. Think about it. Nobody heard a word about these so-called record-breaking finals. Not on sports radio, not on TV, not even across social media feeds. How does a game that barely filled the seats suddenly pull massive nationwide ratings? Something's not adding up. Reports started surfacing fast, hinting that some shady new data methods might have been used to boost the numbers, basically making the league's success look a whole lot bigger than reality. When ESPN proudly announced those numbers, 1.9 million viewers and a 2.5 million peak, the league went wild. Headlines everywhere screamed about history being made, fans showing up, and executives acting like they just hit the jackpot. It was supposed to be the breakthrough moment after years of struggling for attention. But then, within hours, the party vibes flipped to full-on chaos. People online started digging, and what they found didn't look good. Fans noticed there were no trending hashtags, no viral highlight clips, no "did you see that?" moments lighting up Twitter or TikTok. Sports talk shows didn't even mention the game. Radio hosts skipped over it completely. Even die-hard WNBA fans said they didn't realize the finals had even started. One person posted, "Wait guys, when did Game 1 even happen?" Another said, "How's this breaking records when nobody's watching?"
1.9 million viewers with a peak of 2.5 million. ESPN scores most watched Game 1 of the WNBA Finals in 28 years, behind only 1997's single-game championship.
The disconnect was wild, like the league was celebrating a ghost audience. Something about this entire record-breaking story just feels off, real off. Then things got even messier. Analysts started poking holes in ESPN's claims, and what they found was wild. ESPN said the numbers came from official Nielsen metrics, but guess what? There were no independent Nielsen reports anywhere to back that up. Normally, Nielsen posts all their data publicly for transparency, but this time, silence. Total blackout. Only ESPN was doing the talking, and that instantly made everyone suspicious. People began whispering that maybe, just maybe, this record wasn't as real as they wanted us to think. Then came the kicker. Buried deep in the fine print was a sneaky note about a methodology update. Turns out Nielsen had quietly rolled out something called Big Data Plus Panel earlier in the year. Sounds fancy, right? But here's the catch. It completely changed what counted as viewership. Now, anyone who caught even a glimpse of the game, at a bar, gym, restaurant, or airport, suddenly counted as a viewer. Basically, if your eyes even brushed past a TV showing the finals, congratulations, you were part of the record. That's insane. So this wasn't about loyal fans tuning in for every play. It was about counting every single passing glance. ESPN's so-called historic moment suddenly looked more like a numbers trick than a real breakthrough. The host of the Bendo podcast nailed it when he said, "Are these silent viewers?" Because nobody's talking about this game. That one line hit like a truth bomb. Exactly what everyone was thinking. Now the league had a shiny success story to parade around for sponsors and media headlines, but the vibe behind the scenes was icy. If this really was the most watched finals opener since 1997, why did it feel like nobody actually saw it? The truth was spreading fast. This record might have been nothing more than a digital mirage. This whole thing wasn't built on real fan energy. It was built on data manipulation dressed up as progress. And the second fans started digging. The story collapsed faster than a bad PR stunt.
I saw these ratings and went, my first literal response, "Oh, that's bullshit." My first response. Literally the first thing out of my mouth was,
If the WNBA Finals really pulled in almost 2 million viewers, then where on earth was the buzz? That's what everyone kept shouting. Where's the hype? Normally, when a sporting event breaks records, it's everywhere. Timelines explode with highlights, sports shows replay the best moments on loop, and news outlets can't stop talking about it. But this time, silence. Like the game never happened. Even the big networks that were supposed to be celebrating this massive milestone barely cared. No segments, no coverage, no victory lap. Just awkward quiet. It felt like a record that lived only on paper, not in the real world. The host of the Bendo podcast said it best. I haven't heard a single person mention the finals. Not on ESPN, not on Fox Sports, not even on Twitter. That hit everyone hard because he was right. Normally, WNBA clips flood timelines, but this time there was barely a ripple. Even the league's most die-hard fans weren't talking. The silence was almost eerie, like the excitement had been erased. That weird disconnect became the spark that lit a firestorm of doubt. People started wondering if this historic success was actually just smoke and mirrors. And when fans compared the finals to other sports airing the same weekend, NASCAR, college football, MLB playoffs, it looked even worse. Those events had way more online chatter, even when their ratings were smaller. So what's going on here? Either the WNBA audience suddenly went silent overnight, or those millions of viewers never existed in the first place. The vibe didn't match the math, and that mismatch had everyone calling foul. Then the deeper layers started peeling back, and that's when things got really wild. Analysts began realizing that ESPN's historic viewership claims were missing one crucial thing: transparency. The official Nielsen report, the gold standard for confirming audience numbers, had mysteriously never been released to the public. Instead, ESPN's press release relied on its own internal data and a vague, updated methodology. Suspicious doesn't even begin to cover it.
Methodology change. A key factor in 2025 is a change in Nielsen's methodology to include big data plus panel, which incorporates out-of-home viewing. A change that generally results in higher reported viewership for all sports broadcasts compared to previous years. Critics argue that some reported year-over-year growth may be partially attributable to this methodological change, which is not always clearly noted in press releases, of course, not noted in this year's press.
That's when fans started connecting the dots. ESPN isn't just some neutral broadcaster. It's a financial partner with the WNBA. The better the league looks, the more ad money ESPN pockets, and the more credibility it builds for its own brand. So now people were asking the hard question: was this really a ratings miracle or a perfectly staged PR illusion? The more you think about it, the clearer it gets. That silence around the finals wasn't random. It was strategic. On Reddit, X, and even private forums, fans started tearing into the numbers. Posts blew up calling these so-called viewers phantom fans. Millions of people supposedly watched, yet not a single trace of conversation. No memes, no clips, nothing. Others started comparing it to those overhyped movie box office records that are all marketing spin and zero substance. Pretty soon, the term manufactured success started trending in smaller sports communities. It became the phrase everyone used to describe this whole fiasco. The skepticism spread fast, and both ESPN and the WNBA found themselves stuck in an awkward, humiliating position. The numbers sounded amazing, sure, but the cultural footprint? Tiny. Fans began demanding answers, asking if the league's credibility was being traded for clout. What was supposed to be undeniable proof of growth had turned into a case study in distrust. The backlash got so intense that it sparked deeper investigations. And then came the smoking gun. One major revelation finally exposed how all these silent viewers magically appeared, and it all led back to a secret shift in how ratings were actually counted. As the confusion boiled over, the truth began surfacing, and it traced straight to a quiet but powerful internal move by Nielsen. Early in 2025, they'd quietly introduced a new formula called Big Data Plus Panel. On paper, it sounded like a sleek high-tech upgrade meant to capture a fuller picture of audience habits.
Listen to sports radio. I'm not getting any WNBA Finals. I'll turn on ESPN. I'm not getting any WNBA Finals. I'll turn on Fox Sports 1. I'm not getting any WNBA Finals. Nowhere I look, do I see people really discussing the WNBA Finals? And ESPN spits out 1.9 million viewers. Are these silent viewers? They very well.
But behind the scenes, it was rewriting what viewership really meant. In reality, this so-called innovation completely blurred the line between real fans and inflated stats. The new system didn't just track people watching the game at home anymore, it started counting anyone who even looked at a screen showing it. Bars, restaurants, airports, gyms, it didn't matter. You could have just walked past a TV for 5 seconds and boom, congratulations. You were part of the WNBA's record-breaking audience. That one quiet tweak flipped the entire sports ratings world upside down. Suddenly, every big broadcast, and from football to tennis, saw massive spikes in viewership. But guess who benefited the most? The WNBA, a league desperate for any kind of proof that it was finally gaining momentum. ESPN and the league's PR machine wasted no time throwing confetti, bragging about historic growth, and dropping press releases like fireworks. But here's the catch. They forgot to mention that the way numbers were measured had totally changed. It wasn't that more people suddenly cared, it's that more people were being counted. Fans and analysts immediately started calling it what it was: statistical inflation. One sports writer even joked it was like injecting steroids into the ratings, artificially boosting totals just to make the league look healthier than it really is. Even loyal WNBA fans started raising eyebrows, wondering if this so-called growth was real or just engineered by clever data manipulation. The timing made it all look even more suspicious. Why did this new system roll out right before the finals? And why was ESPN the only outlet so confident about these record numbers? It felt a little too perfect.
NBA Finals opener is the most watched since league's inaugural year, I believe in 1997. That means it took nearly 27 years to get to this point. 27 years to get to this point. So they started out on a high, and it's just been...
Industry insiders later explained that this big data model merges digital signals from smart TVs and streaming devices with tiny samples from traditional households. Sounds advanced, but here's the issue. It often overestimates engagement, especially for niche sports. Basically, a crowded bar with 20 people could count as 20 viewers, even if only one person was actually watching the game. That's not real fan engagement. That's just math magic dressed up as success. Even if only one person in a bar was actually paying attention, Nielsen's new system counted everyone else around them too, turning a few glances into millions of viewers. Multiply that across thousands of venues and suddenly, boom, the WNBA Finals looked like a coast-to-coast spectacle. That was the hidden loophole fans had no clue existed, and it gave ESPN the perfect shield. They could boast sky-high numbers while technically telling the truth. Just not the whole truth. They didn't fabricate data, they just cherry-picked reality to make themselves look like geniuses. And since Nielsen's new system doesn't publicly break down those inflated numbers, nobody could verify a thing. What started as a simple ratings headline turned into a full-blown revelation about how easily data can twist public perception. That so-called record-breaking night wasn't proof of unstoppable growth, it was proof of how the system itself can rewrite reality. But the fallout didn't stop there. Because once people realized how fragile those numbers really were, the spotlight swung right back to one name everyone knows: Caitlin Clark. Even though she wasn't on the court for this year's finals, her presence was everywhere. She's the reason fans even started caring again. Every conversation, every debate, every viral post somehow circled back to her name. People started saying it out loud. The only reason the WNBA ever hit those kinds of numbers in the first place was because of Caitlin Clark's wave. Last season, she brought the storm, headlines, sellouts, and a brand new crowd that had never watched a women's game before. She became that bridge the league had been praying for. The connection between college supernova energy and professional spotlight. And when fans finally pulled up the stats, it was impossible to ignore.
Does it happen when literally nobody is talking about the action?
Caitlin's first-round playoff game against the Connecticut Sun? It averaged 2.5 million viewers, higher than the finals opener ESPN was calling historic. That hit like a slap of truth. Suddenly, the so-called record looked less like a triumph for the league, and more like a shadow of what Caitlin Clark had already built. Her peak audience didn't just make noise, it shattered expectations. Caitlin Clark's playoff broadcast pulled a massive 3.4 million viewers, nearly a full million more than the finals opener that ESPN was hyping up. And here's the wild part. Those numbers came before Nielsen's big data adjustment even existed. That means her viewership was 100% authentic. No bars, no airport lounges, no background TVs, just real fans sitting down locked in and watching her light up the court. That one comparison exposed a truth the league didn't want anyone to say out loud. The WNBA's biggest draw isn't the league, it's one player. Without her, the finals couldn't generate real buzz, even with record numbers. ESPN and the WNBA PR machine tried to spin it as collective growth, but the numbers told a different story. A story where Caitlin Clark's shadow towered over the entire championship. Critics noticed the dodge right away. While ESPN proudly flaunted the finals' 1.9 million viewers, they conveniently ignored that Caitlin's games had doubled that figure just one season earlier. Instead of giving her the credit, they reshaped the narrative, selling the illusion of league-wide momentum instead of admitting it was all powered by one phenomenon in a ponytail.
When are numbers not what the numbers are when you see them? Oh, sure feels like there might be some funny business going on. Is there a little nasty work going on behind the scenes? A little abracadabra, bewitched action? Stephanie White knows this one. Yeah, she's conjuring up ratings for the Aces.
But fans weren't fooled for a second. They saw the pattern clear as day. When Caitlin played, engagement exploded. When she didn't, it flatlined. Even longtime WNBA vets started quietly admitting it. Caitlin Clark had reshaped the entire visibility of the game. She pulled mainstream sports media into the conversation, attracted new sponsors, boosted merch sales, and gave teams their first sellouts in years. And yet, the league's leadership stays cagey. They hesitate to give her full credit, scared that acknowledging her dominance might make the rest of the roster look irrelevant. That hesitation is exactly what's driving fans crazy. Everyone can see it. The WNBA is cashing in on Caitlin's power while pretending the success came organically. Now, when people look at those inflated finals ratings, they see them for what they are: an attempt to mask the league's growing dependence on one superstar. Those so-called record numbers were meant to paint a picture of balance and stability. But the truth is crystal clear. The WNBA's pulse still beats to Caitlin Clark's rhythm. She's the reason casual fans tune in, the reason sponsors open their wallets, and the reason people care about women's basketball again. And the more analysts dig, the more obvious it gets. Those success stories aren't proof of league growth. They're proof of how far one player's influence can go when the entire sport rides her wave. Those flashy, record-breaking headlines didn't just glorify the league, they protected its fragile image. And once analysts lined up a full decade of WNBA ratings side by side, the truth hit like a freight train. The data showed exactly how steep and stagnant the climb had been before Caitlin Clark ever arrived. When people finally looked beyond ESPN's glowing headlines and started digging into real numbers from the last 10 years, a whole different picture appeared. Between 2015 and 2022, the WNBA Finals viewership barely moved. And in several seasons, it actually dropped. By 2019, the league hit rock bottom, averaging only 238,000 viewers for its finals, a devastating low that had sponsors quietly backing away. Even championship games were buried on ESPN2 or ESPNU, networks usually reserved for replays and talk shows, not major live events. For years, WNBA broadcasts drew smaller audiences than mid-level college matchups. The momentum was flatlined, the buzz non-existent, and everyone inside the league knew it. Then, almost overnight, the numbers exploded. By 2023, the finals climbed to around 729,000 viewers. In 2024, it skyrocketed to 1.14 million, and by 2025, ESPN was shouting from the rooftops that the finals opener had reached 1.9 million. The biggest leap in nearly 30 years. But for fans who'd been paying attention, something about that massive jump didn't smell right. It didn't look organic. It looked manufactured. The timing was just too perfect. Because right before that explosion, Caitlin Clark had just finished her record-shattering college career, turning every Iowa game into a national event. Her name dominated headlines, her highlights were viral daily, and arenas were packed from coast to coast just to watch her play. So when she made the leap to the WNBA, that wave of attention followed her instantly. Fans who had never even cared about women's basketball before were suddenly tuning in, but not for the league. They were tuning in for her. Caitlin was the draw, the brand, the moment, everything. And then the contrast became impossible to ignore. Once her rookie season ended and she wasn't part of the finals, the vibe completely shifted. The playoffs without Caitlin felt quiet. The spark was gone, and fans could feel it. Ticket prices dropped, online mentions fell flat. Yet somehow ESPN insisted that the finals viewership was higher than ever. That's when the biggest question surfaced. How could interest be peaking when the league's biggest star wasn't even playing? Critics lined up the charts and the pattern was undeniable. Before Caitlin Clark, the WNBA was barely treading water. After she arrived, the entire sport suddenly came alive. Viewership climbed everywhere, from regular season matchups to playoff showdowns, but without Caitlin Clark front and center, the surge suddenly looked fake sustained. It felt like the league was riding her wave while pretending it was their own storm. ESPN's flashy press release hyped league-wide momentum and growing fan engagement. But one thing stood out. They never said her name. Not once. It was a clever PR play or keep the spotlight on the brand, not the player who made the brand relevant again. But once analysts dropped that decade-long breakdown, there was no escaping the truth. For nearly 10 years, the WNBA couldn't even crack 500,000 viewers. Then Caitlin Clark stepped onto the court. And boom! Ratings didn't just rise. They tripled. Suddenly, the league had its miracle moment, and executives were desperate to prove it wasn't all temporary. That desperation, though, might have crossed the line into creative accounting. Between Nielsen's new big data formula and ESPN's suspiciously selective reporting, this miracle of growth stopped looking inspiring and started looking straight up suspicious. Fans weren't buying it anymore. The pushback came fast and loud. Longtime WNBA supporters, sports journalists, and casual viewers all started demanding receipts. If the numbers were real, why wasn't there an official Nielsen report to verify them? Why was ESPN the only one releasing data? And why did it take so long? Those questions flooded X, Reddit, and YouTube comments like wildfire. The illusion of unstoppable progress was starting to crumble. Fast. The silence made it even worse. Usually when a sport hits a milestone, networks celebrate with interviews, debates, and highlight reels on every channel. But this time, dead quiet. No victory laps, no post-game pressers, no look how far we've come moments, just silence that screamed louder than any headline. People started connecting the dots. Maybe the WNBA didn't want to talk because they knew the story wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. The numbers looked shiny on paper, but the vibe told another story. Even loyal fans began to feel uneasy, realizing the league's PR machine was running on borrowed momentum. The whole situation became impossible to ignore. A sport trying to prove it could thrive without the one player who made the world care in the first place. And as those record-breaking numbers got plastered across every news outlet, the backlash only grew stronger. The public wanted answers, not press releases. And this time, ESPN and the WNBA couldn't hide behind silence anymore. No independent verification, no transparency. That eerie quiet from ESPN and the WNBA started looking less like a celebration and more like damage control. Fans felt totally played, like the truth was being buried under a mountain of PR spin. And once online threads started blowing up, it was game over. Viewers began tearing apart every single line of ESPN's statement, comparing it word for word with Nielsen's archived data from previous years. And what they found didn't add up. There were discrepancies everywhere. Missing context, weird phrasing, selective stats, all of it screamed manipulation. The flashy up 62% year-over-year headline, yeah, that number didn't even specify which games were being compared. Fans noticed ESPN kept mixing average, peak, and total viewership in the same breath, blurring the lines to make the numbers sound massive. It didn't look like honest reporting. It looked like marketing dressed up as math. Independent data trackers from sports business networks even jumped in, calling out ESPN for leaving out the standard Nielsen citation code, something every legitimate report includes. Without that code, there was no way to verify anything. One analyst put it bluntly, if there's no code, there's no credibility. Even veteran commentators, the ones who usually defended the league, started backing away. One openly called the report a manufactured headline to please investors, while another said it flat out, "They're counting ghosts." That phrase, "counting ghosts," exploded online, trending across social media as fans united around one idea: they couldn't trust the official story anymore. And here's what made it sting even more. This backlash wasn't coming from casual trolls. These were loyal WNBA fans, people who had supported the league through its lowest points, bought tickets, shared highlights, and celebrated real milestones. They wanted progress, not propaganda. Many felt straight up insulted that the league thought inflated stats could replace authentic engagement. The whole conversation flipped overnight, from celebration to accountability. Fans weren't asking, "How high were the ratings?" anymore. They were asking, "Who's benefiting from lying about them?" Even players started throwing subtle shade online. Cryptic posts, vague likes, small jabs hinting at frustration without naming names. Behind the scenes, that trust between players, management, and fans started cracking fast. The more the league avoided explaining the numbers, the guiltier it looked. And by the end of the week, what was supposed to be a record-breaking victory had turned into a full-blown credibility crisis. Fans wanted receipts, real ones, verified data, official sources, something tangible to prove the WNBA wasn't manipulating numbers for attention. But when the answers didn't come, the narrative shifted once again, this time to something much deeper, something no amount of PR spin could hide anymore. The question wasn't just about ratings anymore, it was about trust. And once fans start doubting that, the entire foundation of the league is at risk. The real question started echoing louder than ever. Was ESPN's loyalty to the WNBA creating a media mirage, blurring truth and marketing beyond recognition? As the scrutiny exploded online, analysts started connecting dots that had been hiding in plain sight. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This was never just about ratings. It was about money, influence, and control. ESPN isn't just a broadcaster. It's one of the WNBA's biggest business partners. Its reputation and its wallet are directly tied to how the league performs. When the WNBA looks strong, ESPN's investment looks like genius. But when the league stumbles, that partnership starts to look like a bad deal. Suddenly it all made sense. The success story wasn't about celebrating growth, it was about protecting the bag. Insiders started calling it what it really was, a mutual illusion. ESPN needed big numbers to keep advertisers and investors confident, while the WNBA needed a shiny validation moment to lure in sponsors and justify expansion. Together they found a shortcut. Inflated stats wrapped up in fancy new data methods. Both sides got what they wanted. At least for a little while. On paper it looked like progress. In reality it was smoke and mirrors. The silence that followed wasn't accidental, it was strategic. By letting that press release stand alone with no follow-up interviews or Q&As, ESPN sidestepped any tough questions. Meanwhile, the perception of success spread like wildfire, unchallenged and unverified. And for a brief moment, it worked. Major media outlets across the country repeated ESPN's record-breaking headline word for word. No fact-checking, no context, just blind amplification. It created a chain reaction of misinformation, giving the illusion of unstoppable success. But the minute fans and analysts started comparing figures, the cracks began to show. Suddenly, every article that had echoed ESPN's claims looked complicit in selling a lie. This wasn't just a PR hiccup, it was a masterclass in media manipulation. A living case study on how corporate power can bend reality in real time. For the WNBA, that short-term boost came with a brutal long-term price. The league's credibility, something it had built carefully over decades, started to crumble. Fans who once believed every official update now questioned everything. Attendance numbers, skeptical, sponsorship deals, maybe inflated. Even player stats started getting side-eyed. That hard-earned trust, the foundation of fan loyalties, was fading fast. What was meant to be the WNBA's greatest media win had instead exposed an uncomfortable truth. When image becomes more important than honesty, the damage doesn't just hit the headlines, it hits the heart of the game. Once trust breaks, it's almost impossible to rebuild. And this scandal proved it. Even inside the world of sports journalism, people were asking tough questions about integrity. Commentators started openly wondering whether networks that profit from broadcasting leagues should even be allowed to report their own ratings. Because seriously, if ESPN is cashing in every time the WNBA looks good, how can anyone trust them to give objective data? And the answer, according to analysts, was brutally simple. You can't. Behind closed doors, insiders said ESPN execs saw this storm coming a mile away. The record-breaking headline had already served its purpose. It created buzz, bought time, and made the league look unstoppable. But now the fallout was tearing at the foundation. Both ESPN and the WNBA were suddenly stuck, caught between the need for legitimacy and their growing addiction to spin.
The irony was almost poetic. In trying to prove how far the league had come, they ended up revealing how far it still has to go. Real growth doesn't need manipulation, it needs transparency. But that was the one thing both sides kept avoiding. And as more fans started losing faith, the whole conversation shifted once again. This time, right back to the one person they couldn't spin away from. Caitlin Clark. She became the mirror that showed the league its real reflection. Even when she wasn't on the court, her presence was everywhere. Her name defined every conversation, every debate, every headline. She was the gravitational pull holding the entire league's relevance together. And her absence in the finals exposed a brutal truth. Without her, the WNBA's appeal looked fragile. Fans weren't flocking to the finals matchup itself. They were still chasing the magic of Caitlin Clark. Every online argument, every record-breaking claim, every trending post somehow circled back to her. That made the league's leadership squirm because they wanted to downplay her impact while secretly relying on it to survive. During her rookie season, Caitlin turned every game into an event. Tickets sold out in hours, merch vanished overnight, and arenas packed out like it was a concert, not a basketball game. The atmosphere was electric. She made people care. But the second her team got bounced from the playoffs, everything changed. The hype deflated. The engagement dipped. The so-called momentum started slowing down fast, and everyone noticed. It was undeniable proof that the league's heartbeat was tied to one player. Caitlin wasn't just the face of the WNBA, she was its lifeline. And now, as the controversy over those inflated ratings kept growing, that truth couldn't be hidden anymore. Because every time the WNBA tried to show its strength, the same reality echoed back louder. Without Caitlin Clark, the story just doesn't sell. Instead of proving growth, they proved the opposite. Analysts everywhere started calling it the Caitlin Clark effect, in reverse. When she played, ratings soared. When she didn't, the illusion of league-wide growth collapsed overnight. Even players and coaches began subtly admitting it, though some couldn't hide their frustration, saying her fame was overshadowing the rest of the league. But fans weren't falling for that jealousy narrative anymore. They saw the truth plain as day. Caitlin Clark wasn't the problem, she was the lifeline. The tension between league pride and Clark dependence became impossible to ignore. On one side, executives wanted to project a polished, united front, the image of a strong, growing league. But on the other side, everyone knew their most valuable asset wasn't a system, a strategy, or a slogan. It was one rookie. A single player who did more to elevate women's basketball than any marketing campaign or commissioner's speech ever could. And the more they tried to downplay her influence, the clearer it became. She was carrying the league's visibility on her back. In the end, that desperate attempt to inflate finals ratings completely backfired. What was supposed to showcase collective strength ended up spotlighting individual brilliance. Fans saw it for what it was. Caitlin Clark didn't just boost viewership, she was the viewership. And until the WNBA accepts that truth, with honesty, respect, and transparency, every so-called record will ring hollow. The numbers might look shiny on paper, but without authenticity, they're just empty echoes of the shadow she left behind. The league wanted to celebrate a historic finals, but instead, it walked straight into a credibility nightmare. The message was crystal clear. Caitlin Clark built the stage, filled the seats, and brought the spotlight. And the moment she stepped off, the illusion of success vanished with her. What was supposed to prove progress ended up exposing just how fragile the league's foundation really is. The inflated numbers, the missing transparency, and that strange silence surrounding the so-called record all pointed to one uncomfortable truth. Perception had replaced authenticity. ESPN and league executives wanted a success story so badly they built one out of technicalities and selective reporting. But fans aren't blind. They noticed. They questioned, they investigated, and they peeled back the glossy headlines to expose the cracks hiding underneath. And standing right in the center of it all was Caitlin Clark. The one player whose influence doesn't need inflation or fabrication. Her shadow reminded everyone what real engagement feels like. passion that can't be faked, energy that can't be manufactured. The WNBA doesn't need doctored stats or manipulated data. It needs honesty, trust, and transparency. Because no algorithm, no spreadsheet, and no marketing spin will ever replace the genuine connection between fans and the game they love. So what do you think? Is the league finally ready to face the truth? Or will it keep hiding behind fake records and hollow headlines? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit that like button, share this video, and make sure to subscribe. Because this story is far from over. See you on the next one.